Well,
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you all for being here on this terrific Tuesday. We'll get started in the next 2 to 3 minutes to get some folks to log on. But before we get started, I am excited to introduce myself to you. Lakara Simmons, she, her pronouns. I'm the Vice President of Training and Programs here at GCAP. And I would love to hear where you all are joining us from. So in the chat, if you can place your name, your org, and then where in Georgia you're joining us from, that would be amazing as we get started. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Awesome. Good morning, JP. Thank you for joining us today. Good morning, Pam. Good morning, Jamila. So happy that you all are here. Hi, Nyla. Good morning. Hi, Candace and Kristen. Hi, Ivy. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Anne Marie. Thank you all for being here. We're going to get started momentarily. Hi, Michael. Hi, Angel. Give folks another minute or two to join. And just to confirm that everyone can see my screen for the morning as well, I know we have a nice full packed agenda for us. Awesome. Good morning, Erin. Thank you so much for joining us today. Wonderful. Well, good morning, folks. I'm just going to go ahead and get started and introduce myself one more time. Good morning. My name is Lakara Simmons. I'm the Vice President of Programs and Training here at the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential. And I am excited to welcome you back to our second Take It to the House legislative briefing here at GCAP. Our first legislative briefing that we had with the organization happened last fall in September of 2024. So I want to go ahead and just level set for us this morning and understanding that as GCAP as an organization are continuing to work alongside the Capitol in providing more information to advancing sex education and sex education policies. So conversations like this about sex education, they're more than just policy discussions. They are all about health and safety and the future for all of Georgia's young people. So the work that we continue to do together really ensures that students are receiving the information that they need to make informed decisions regarding their health, building healthier relationships, and also navigating the futures that they have with success and confidence. So progress doesn't happen like this overnight, but ongoing dialogue and advocacy like what we're having today continues to create that change. So during our last legislative session in September, we were honored to hear from Representative Stacey Evans and then also Bill Wade, who joined us, and they shared their support regarding sex education legislation. We also had Allison Macklin, and she is back with us today to show her support in regards to providing an overview of Georgia's sex education policy and their landscape, and then also highlighting the urgent need for improved policies here across the state of Georgia. So we closed our call back in September with a call to action. So you all, if you attended our first legislative session and briefing, you should have received a nice follow-up link with a call to action. And I'll be doing so again at the end of our call this afternoon or this morning. And so we were really encouraging you all on this call to work alongside us with GCAP and the Capitol to continue to enhance and advance sex education policies. So today, for our agenda today, we are thrilled to continue the conversation, and we are joined today by Representative Jasmine Clark, who will be sharing some of the information that she has regarding policy. Jasmine Clark, we're really honored to have her because she has led and introduced a lot of the bills when it comes to sex education, and you'll see that momentarily. So Jasmine continues to serve as a steadfast advocate and is also a huge supporter. Again, we're joined by Allison Mackey, and she will provide some timely and updated information about the state of affairs, not just for the state of Georgia, but also from a national level as well. And then we'll also receive our legislative briefing and update from our partners over at Terminus. And then we'll close by sharing some next steps in the call to action and also sharing some exciting updates that we have as an organization that's going on Monday at the Capitol. So once again, thank you so much for being here today. And I am going to go ahead and transfer it over to Miss Jasmine if she is on the call. If not, I'm going to pass it over to Wendy and Ted until Jasmine can join us. Hi,
Thanks,
Wendy.
LaCara. Thanks, LaCara. Appreciate the introduction, and appreciate everybody being on this morning. Today is Legislative Day 18 at the state capitol. We have been working feverishly on our comprehensive sex ed legislation, but there are a lot of other issues that are dominating the conversation down here this session that sometimes you just can't anticipate when these kinds of things happen. And so the number one priority in the public education space this session for both the House and the Senate is school safety. Because of the Winder shooting back in the fall, both the House and the Senate have taken this issue very seriously. We are in the second full week of debate in this realm in the House in particular. There continues to be a lot of work to be done in that space. And so, when you come down here, we try to work really closely with Republicans and Democrats equally. This is not a partisan issue, comprehensive sex education, and we treat it as such. And so as a result of that, we continue to work very closely with our House partners. You may recall that under House Bill 822 last year, the bill passed out of committee and we weren't able to get it to the House floor. Thus far, we've not actually introduced the bill because of these various competing interests. And there's another piece that's going on down here that is important to make note of. And our partners in the House leadership, so the chairman of the committee and a number of other members who are supportive of our efforts and supportive of our bill last year, have encouraged us to kind of slow down a little bit and see where we are climate-wise in the Capitol. And the reason for that is there are more than a half a dozen anti-trans bills that have been introduced this year. Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 267 are the two that kind of have dominated the conversation thus far. These two bills intend to ban the trans sports issue in Georgia. There is no question in my mind that one or at least one of those bills is going to make it. It's likely to be House Bill 267 as opposed to Senate Bill 1, but that remains to be seen. Neither of them are actually, Senate Bill 1 is passed over and is already in the House, but House Bill 267 has not moved yet because of the House's priority on school safety. And so they're really focusing on House Bill 268 right now, which is school safety. I expect House Bill 267 will be up later this week, and then will be taken up as well next week on the House side. That, along with several other Senate bills that are targeting the trans community, has led us to believe that we just need to slow down a little bit on our bill this year, because we don't want our legislation to get caught up in and have language inserted in it that is going to have a negative impact on the trans community in Georgia. And more importantly, I think this is really relevant, we really don't want to see comprehensive sex education go backwards. We don't want to see provisions changed in the law that will make it harder for school systems to educate kids in this regard. And so we're working hand in glove every single day with House leadership on both the House Education Committee as well as the leadership in the Speaker's office and the top. We continue to have great support for our issue, but at the same time, we are being cautioned to just kind of slow down and let's take this one step at a time and not have those issues that are already out there in separate legislation bleed into our issue. And so as a result of that, we continue to talk to House leadership every single day and keep our GCAP leadership up to date with those conversations. In addition to those matters that were happening down here, the House has passed over the amended budget over to the Senate more than 2 weeks ago now. And so we expect that the Conference Committee on the amended FY25 budget, FY25 budget will be taken up and considered hopefully next week is my expectation on the House and Senate floor. In the meantime, the House is diligently working on the FY26 budget, which is already underway in terms of debate and discussion down here at the Capitol. So happy to take any questions, LaCara, and I'm also happy to just offer any other discussion at this point as we wait for Dr. Clark to join.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the update, Wendy. The question that comes to mind in the immediate is, what is the most important thing that participants on this call and attendees can do at this time, and also keep an eye out for as these bills are continuing to come down the pipeline?
I think for folks on the call to just continue to advocate for really what's best for young people. You know, we oftentimes in this building, in my opinion, get caught up in what we as adults think. And unfortunately, this issue in particular is really about what the 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old thinks in this conversation, because they're the ones that are getting this instruction. The adult conversation is a little bit more hardcore, right? Because they're members of the legislature, 180 House members and 56 senators, and everybody has an opinion about this issue, even if it's an uninformed opinion. And so what I would encourage folks on the call to do is continue to have those discussions, educate and inform. This is not about partisanship. This is about educating young people, helping them understand their own personal health and well-being, and how we can empower them and teach them, you know, all the different things that are a part of what a comprehensive sex education class ought to be. Hope that's helpful.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much, Wendy, for that information. And I'll open the floor and I'm looking in the chat to see if any other questions came in for Wendy before I am so honored to introduce Dr. Jasmine Clark, who just joined the call. Okay, hearing none and seeing none at this time, it is my honor and privilege for us to pivot back and introduce the amazing Dr. Jasmine Clark, who's here, and as I said, introduce several of the bills related to sex education here in the state of Georgia. So, Dr. Clark, good morning and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much. I do want to say I apologize for not being on camera at this moment. I will be on shortly, but I'm still driving into the Capitol. But I wanted to be here on time, and I really wanted to be here for this conversation, because I have been working on comprehensive sex education since I first got elected. So I was elected in 2018, and one of the first bills I introduced was a comprehensive sex education bill. And if you can see on the slide that y'all have up, the interesting thing about this journey toward getting age appropriate and medically accurate sex education in Georgia is that, you know, when I first introduced the bill, I did have bipartisan signatures, but I was very new. And I didn't realize that in the House, if the signatures are not the top 6, they don't show up. So I, had some Republicans that were willing to sign on, but they signed on, where their name didn't show up. And I went to the chairwoman of the committee that it was introduced in, Chairwoman Sharon Cooper at the time, because it went to the Health and Human Services Committee. And she said, in not so many words, Representative Jasmine Clark is a freshman legislator, and she will not get a hearing on this bill, and she needs to learn her place as a freshman legislator. That I was taken aback by that, but that did not stop me from wanting to continue to push for this, because I truly believed in it. I actually was brought this issue by a constituent, and I, said, as a mom of a daughter, at the time, my daughter was in elementary school, but she would be going to middle school soon. This was an issue that was important to me as well. And so I kept introducing the bill. Every 2 years, sometimes even in the same session, I would introduce the bill or introduce different versions of the bill. And finally working with Wendy Clifton, I was able to find a Republican willing to sponsor the bill. Now, this is where you learn the politics of the state legislature. I had a bill that had the language that we were looking for, medically accurate. I also wanted to teach about consent in our sex education, and again, age appropriate. Same exact language. We get the Republican to sponsor a copycat bill, copied and pasted, just a different bill number with a different sponsor at the top. And his bill gets a hearing. Not only does it get a hearing, it passes both subcommittee and committee in the education committee. This is actually a really big deal because we have been working on this for a really long time. That's the furthest it's ever gotten. It made it to rules, but it did not make it through rules. So it did not make it to the floor. But we have tremendous momentum on our side as far as there are a lot of people on both sides that recognize that Georgia is behind on this issue. Georgia is behind on what we require of our sex education, and we need to catch up. A lot of what we're asking for in the bills are things that other states already do, both Democratic states and Republican states, as far as leadership goes. So I came on just as Wendy was talking about partisanship. This is not a partisan issue. It never should have been a partisan issue. But there are definitely people out there that still are of the mindset that sex education is educating kids to have sex or encouraging kids to have sex. And because of that, we do still have some people that are using this, unfortunately, in a partisan way to say that we are trying to teach kids about things that we shouldn't be talking about. Before I finish up and open it up for questions, I want to just tell a story. My daughter, when she was in the 5th grade, I had already told her about menstruation. She had pads, and she had pads in her book bag, in a little pouch in her book bag, and she had not started yet, but I still felt like this was information she needed to know. She had a classmate who had no idea what was going on with her body. She went to the bathroom, she had started her cycle. She had no idea what was going on, what was happening to her body. And my daughter had to intervene. Imagine the fear of my daughter's classmate. There are some parents that are doing the best that they can, but they do not feel comfortable talking about these things. They do not feel comfortable talking about sex. So while there are people out there that believe that this should be up to the parents to teach, there are a lot of parents that are like, no, please, you do it, because I don't know what to say. I don't know how to approach this. I don't know what to do. I would rather this be done, in a classroom setting. And so we want to make sure that while these students are in the classroom setting, they are getting the appropriate information. They are getting medically accurate scientific information, and we are not teaching from a morals or quote values-based sex education perspective, but from a science and biology based form of sex education, so that students are getting the information they need to make informed decisions. And so would love to take questions, and I'm about to hop on video as well in about 5 seconds. So I appreciate y'all working with me on that.
No, thank you so much for your time and patience. I appreciate you for being here, Dr. Clark, and I'm looking in the chat to see if there's any questions for you, or if anybody would like to come off mute, I'll offer that up as an option as well. Yes. Hi, Andre. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi. So I was wondering if you could provide some clarity around what you mean when you say the top 6 signatures. Is it the top 6 signatures? Is that in relation to position and title, or is it what do you mean when you say the top 6 signatures as far as the bill probably not being seen if the top 6 signatures are not there?
So this is the inside baseball side of things. So in the state house, we have, when you want to sponsor a bill, you put your name on the bill, at the top of the bill, and then you solicit signatures from other legislators. On the Senate side, if you solicit signatures, every single person who signed on and said yes to that bill, and hi everybody, every single person that signed on and said yes to the bill, their name will show up on the website as being a sponsor of the bill. In the House, however, even if you have 100 signatures, the only people who show up as being a sponsor, like that are, searchable on the search engine, on the website, the only people that actually show up as being the sponsors are the first 6 signatures. And so a bipartisan bill is often a bill that has at least 1 or 2 people, like in my case, 1 or 2 Republicans, or in a Republican's case, 1 or 2 Democrats in that top 6. And it shows up on the website then as a bill that is sponsored by both Democrats and Republicans. So, again, I could have 100 signatures, I could have everyone's signature, but the only ones that people see, the only ones that are publicly available for people to know that they signed on to the bill, are the first 6 signatures. And so those first 6 lines are really important. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Dr. Clark. Any other questions that are coming in? I want to be very respectful of your time as well. So thank you again.
No, it's no problem. I really do appreciate you all doing this. And I really do appreciate the push for doing this. And I love that we are now in a space, in a place where we recognize that this is not a partisan issue. And I just hope that that turns into actually getting something good, and that things don't get derailed or go off track in any way. But for this moment, I'm just really hopeful that we are able to get something done.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. I do have a question or a hand raised as well for you. Hello, I see a totally wow. Hi, thank you for joining.
Hi. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Jamila Aisha, and my question is for Representative Clark. You mentioned that some of the issues of passing the bills are that people are still reluctant because they feel like the education is teaching children to have sex. Do they typically come with examples for that? And my second question is, are there any other reasons they might be pushing back on these bills?
So, we are now in a political climate where things do not happen in a vacuum. And so we're in the same political climate where we have, lots of conversations around transgender individuals. We have a lot of conversations about books and what's in those books and what books are teaching, so if you put things into that context, a lot of it is just fear that if we allow for this to happen, that we might allow for some of these books that have been taught for ages, but now all of a sudden are being labeled as salacious or promoting sex. What about that context? So I don't think they've ever come with any specific examples of the curriculum itself teaching students to have sex. I do think that there are maybe small anecdotes a lot of times about like, oh, well, one teacher taught this or said this in class, but none of those things I've ever actually seen anything substantiating those claims. And so I think we have to think about it in a larger context. For example, one person said that the reason why we shouldn't teach consent is because teaching consent is basically teaching kids to say yes to sex, and we should not be promoting sex before marriage. There's no real context to that. That's just the way they feel about teaching consent. Where on the one hand, that's how they feel. On the other hand, we have, teachers, coaches, college professors, and others that are saying these students need to know what consent is so they can stay out of trouble, because that's the type of trouble that doesn't go away. So I do think that it really just is perspectives and how people view all of these things. But I do want to recognize that a lot of the conversations around sex education aren't just about sex education. They are in the larger political context of all the other conversations that we're having.
Understood. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Representative Clark, if you have time for 2 more questions, Michael, I see your hand, and then there's a question in the chat that I want to get to. So Michael, your question, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. This is Michael Horowitz. This is a question for Representative Clark, and also Wendy can address this as well if pertinent. My question has to do with, we're now speaking about the state level, but there is a very big federal government with some very ambitious plans which counter some of the things we're speaking about. What impact would the federal government have on either not funding anything that is done or not allowing anything that we're talking about? It's all fine and good if we decide what our local health departments and our local education departments are going to do, if the federal government has a methodology to prohibit or forbid any of it. Any thoughts on this and where we are?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I can imagine that the federal government could, cherry pick and choose, saying like, oh, any curriculum that teaches about this can't be funded or that can't be funded, the same way they are right now deciding anything that teaches about diversity or bias or justice or all of a sudden are, is bad. So, there are implications for that. What I will say is there's also just a lot of uncertainty around that. I think there are a lot of things being done at the federal level that are actually not lawful, and we're going to have to see how those things play out in court. And so it's always something that we can consider, but I would say at the state level, that doesn't stop us from just trying our best to get the ball rolling and get things moving, because a lot of this stuff can get mired in court. And, and at the end of the day, Georgia is last on this. I want to be clear. We're not trailblazers. We are not doing anything that no one else is doing with these bills. We are literally playing catch up. So at the federal level, trying to go after comprehensive sex education and medically accurate sex education would have far-reaching consequences way beyond Georgia. And so I hope that the current powers that be recognize that and leave it alone, but I cannot say for sure that that's what will happen. So we're kind of in a wait and see mode when it comes to what the federal government's going to do.
That was so helpful. Thank you so much, Representative Clark. And then the last question that I have before you need to hop off is a question from Ms. Austin. Where can we find publicly available briefing documents or other materials used to educate legislators on the issue?
Oh, so I think a lot of times those documents come from organizations like SIECUS and please, I charge it to my head, not my heart, that I can't name all the orgs, but the organizations. Rarely do the legislators like myself put out policy briefings and stuff like that. It's just not something that we have put out, but we will, speak on it when it comes to committee and things like that. A lot of times we do rely on information from organizations to get the information out about the bills. But if there's anything in particular that you would like to see from my office, I'm more than happy to put something out. But yeah, we usually rely on the orgs for that, just because there's for every one bill that's really important to an org, there's 400 that we're working on. So it's really difficult to get a policy brief out for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, thank you, Allison. Allison is also here with SECUS that Representative Clark just mentioned. Also here at GCAP, we have resources as well on our website.
Yes.
So go to gcap.org. And then if you go down to our library of resources in our county fact sheets, that is also what we help and provide to Wendy and to Ted with Terminus, and then to other representatives as well about the issues that are happening across the state. So you are spot on, Representative Clark. Thank you so much. Yes, and Advocates for Youth as well is another wonderful resource. Additionally, yes, absolutely.
See, I didn't want to start naming things because then I know it's going to mess up. I should have at least said GCAP, though. I apologize for that.
Oh, wow, you're good. No, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here. I know you had a hard stop at 10:30, so I want to say thank you. And if there's any other questions that come in the chat, I'll be sure to go ahead and send that your way, Representative Clark. Thank you for being here.
Thank y'all so much for having me. Y'all have a good rest of y'all's day and a good rest of y'all's conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for that mix-up. I lost signal for a second. Let me go ahead and share again. My apologies. And go over to Allison Macklin with SECUS. Allison, good morning. Sorry about that, folks. Technology.
No worries. Good morning. And it's snowing where I am. So I was like, oh, is it the snow? Did something happen? So I'm so glad that we're all set. Well, my name's Allison Macklin. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Policy and Advocacy Director here at SECUS, Sex Ed for Social Change. Briefly, we are a national nonprofit organization that fights for and advocates for sex education. And that also includes fighting back against bad sex education bills. We do have a number of great publications that talk about what we're seeing around trends at the federal level. But then also we have our state report cards, which I'm going to talk a little bit about for Georgia. So next slide, please. So we know, and as Representative Clark talked about, sex education is overwhelmingly popular. Over 30 years of research shows that not only does it delay the first initiation of sexual activity and an increased contraception use when people are sexually active, it reduces dating violence. There are positive mental health outcomes. We know there's a reduction in bullying. There's an expanded understanding of gender and gender norms. There's recognition of gender equity, rights, and social norms, as well as increased academic achievement. Next slide, please. So we got into, I love Michael's question, talking a little bit about like what's going on at the federal level. How does that play out with the states? Well, we are, as Representative Clark alluded to, in a odd political climate right now. But typically at the federal level, we see that the federal government makes very broad proclamations. So, for example, the desegregation of schools was a federal policy that was then filtered, down to the state level to implement. So most sex education policy and most education policy actually happens at the state level. So the federal government will come up with these broad statements of like, hey, we can't segregate anymore, or hey, Title 10 is really important, Title 9 is really important, like trying to get access to especially marginalized communities. And then the states are like, okay, so we've got this directive, now what? And then they come in and again, even at the state level, there's not a lot of policies specifically focusing on education. So the slew of anti-type of policies, so these anti-consent bills or book banning bills or things like that, are not really things that have historically been seen at the state level. These are things that typically are coming up at the district level, because districts are the ones who take the Board of Education or Department of Education guidance and standards, and they're the ones who have to implement it. So it is interesting that historically the argument has been, let's leave it to the districts, let's not put in policy at the state level. And however, our opposition is definitely going against their own will. And why is a state policy so important to have? Well, we know that when it comes to implementation, things can get messy, and it's really important for the states to have not only the standards that help support sex education, but the policy so that they have a footing to stand on. So currently what we're seeing is we're seeing a slew of executive orders that have been coming out that have been saying you can't do this, you can't do that, this is taken away, etc. Well, the thing about executive orders is that they are policy directives. They are not actually policy. So until Congress approves the executive orders, they are technically not law. And so what we're seeing is some compliance through fear, through intimidation, through just, well, it's going to happen anyway, let's just do it. And so that's where we are with the executive orders. The Department of Education has also been under attack. So we're seeing that there is a number of, there's been a number of stories around the dismantling of the department and what have you. And again, this would need an act of Congress. So the Department of Education can't go anywhere until the Congress says, you know what, we're going to disband this. And so again, that's the House and the Senate both agreeing on that. So the thing with what's going on then is gutting. So again, this tactic where the opposition has been playing and doing this at the state level for years and years, this tactic of kind of like, well, what if we take out this chunk? And what if we take out this chunk? That is the same strategy. So Project 2025 has been alive and well in our states for many, many years. It is just now at the federal government. So that's what we're seeing at the federal government. And we're seeing the ripple effect is really that the states are holding the brunt of these because they're not, there's no guidance, there's no implementation. How do we do this? What are the right things to do? So that's what's going on the federal level. At the state level, what we have are a number of really terrible things that are happening. So terrible attacks on sex education. So we're still seeing things like parental rights curriculum or like overview of parental rights, which it's a false narrative because parents have always had rights when it comes to educating their children. And students also have rights when it comes to education and access. And that is actually a really fundamental core of our history as a country, as access to education and public education. So we're seeing those type of attacks. We're still seeing some book bans attacks. We're still seeing the anti-transgender attacks. And so the reason these attacks are happening is that what we have seen from voters, what we have seen across the board on ballot issues, is that abortion as well as sex education are overwhelmingly popular. The majority of people want access to abortion. They also want access to comprehensive sex education. So the opposition has actually had to pivot their strategy. And their strategy is now to come after transgender people, and specifically transgender and young people, because that's where they can start to put in more regulations or more any sort of like anti anything is around young people. It's really hard to do that at the older age. We've seen attempts to ban like drag shows, for example. Well, those are really hard to get past because that is an adult situation, but they've had more traction, for example, when they say a drag show for young people or reading a book at a library. So it's all about this fear and this, and so it's interesting that in Georgia right now, this safe schools mantra is coming across because, and that can really be a good strategy for us because we know that sex education creates safe schools. We are seeing a number of what are called Baby Olivia bills. So there are 16 states, and I'm going to drop in the chat here our tracker that we have tracking these bills. As of right now, there is not one in Georgia, but we anticipate that to change. So these Baby Olivia type of bills are really anti-abortion propaganda. So they will either talk about watching an ultrasound or fetal development and detailed fetal development, especially for younger audiences, like third grade, fifth grade, that kind of thing. So really targeting younger folks. We have seen some for older folks too, but really these are around co-opting sex education. So saying and really making sex education something that they want it to be, which is truly anti-abortion propaganda. This is a strategy that has been started by Live Action, which is a notorious hate group. And they have doctored videos and they provide false and misleading information. There's a long history there that I won't go into, but it is troubling to see that these states there's a whole slew of them that have been introduced. And we do know that 2 have historically passed. So Tennessee has one and North Dakota also has one. And so this is their strategy, right? That they try it in one place, and then if it works, they're like, ooh, let's replicate it in other places. Well, we do the same strategy. So Representative Clark was talking about, Georgia's behind the schedule and trying to get everybody up to get the state back where it should be or up to par. And so good sex education bills are also happening and also being filed. So we have really, really great sex education bills currently filed in 12 states. So not as many as what's Baby Olivia, but the session isn't over and there's a lot of strategy, as Representative Clark talked about, that goes into when are these filed, how are they filed, et cetera. What's the right environment? So good sex education bills are not just around like these utopian type of bills of like everybody gets sex ed, but even just moving the needle a little bit. So like making Georgia catch up to the rest of the country of where it should be with medically accurate information. Next slide, please. So currently, Georgia, I talked about the state report cards, gets a D+. So it's great that there's already an existing policy on the books. That gets an A+ for sure, because there are definitely states that don't have that type of policy on the books. But unfortunately, the content and how this has been prescribed gets an F. So if you have ever been in a classroom, then you know that kind of bumps the grade up from an F to a D+. But the major component here is that around the content, as Representative Clark talked about, is that there's no regulation regarding medically accurate sex education instruction. So that's really unfortunate. And that means that ideology and values and morality that is primarily fundamentalist Christian can come into the classroom. Well, we know that there's a separation of church and state. That's a federal law that has come down to the state level. So it's trying to get around that federal directive. Next slide, please. So why is this so critically important? Well, Georgia is not doing so great. We know that 58% of all STD cases in 2019 were aged 15 to 24. That's more than half. The Atlanta metro area itself had the 3rd highest rate of new HIV diagnoses in the country. 1 in 10 children in Georgia will experience sexual assault before their 18th birthday. 12% of students report being physically hurt by someone that they were dating or going out with. And then we see 45% LGBTQIA plus youth seriously consider suicide. Georgia ranks 31st in suicide deaths, and it's the highest in the South. Next slide. So we also know that only 11.9% of middle schools and 21.5% of high schools in Georgia reported teaching all 22 sexual health topics as outlined by the Centers for Disease Control. So that's really small and not great. And y'all have the CDC right there in the state. So what does this mean? Inconsistent instruction leads to underprepared young people who are more at risk for unplanned pregnancies, higher STI and HIV rates, and higher incidences of intimate partner violence. So when we talk about sex education being medically accurate, it means taking out these values, taking out what you think is right, and giving young people the facts and the information that they need to make decisions now as well as in their futures. Next slide, please. All right, and
Awesome.
that's me.
That is you. Thank you so much, Allison. We appreciate you. I'll open up the floor if anybody has any questions for Allison. Okay, hearing that. Oh, there is one. Hi, Ivy. Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, Allison. So I actually just came out of the educational system about 4 months ago. And the things that you're talking about directly like impacted the I guess the overall education of the kids. And you know, I was in the middle school, and so they're definitely like exploring and experimenting earlier and earlier. Is there any, I guess there's the old guard of just, you know, this is how things have been done, but are they giving you any indication why there's such a harsh pushback on just providing information? And why there's always this inclination that we're encouraging when it's simply just information? Is there anything there, or is it simply just, this is how things have always been done? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So and Representative Clark hit on this a little bit, but I think again, there's certain beliefs that if we just don't talk about it, it's not going to happen. And we know that that didn't work. We know that didn't work back in the 80s when the DARE program came out. And I don't know if y'all remember the DARE program or have heard about it, probably dating myself. But fear tactics don't work when it comes to sustained change and for helping people develop healthy behaviors and attitudes and beliefs. So what's really important is that we make sure that we come back to the fact that this isn't just about now. This is about in the future. This is about setting young people up for success their entire lives. And I lost the train of my thought just a little bit. So if I'm not hitting your response or the response for you, please let me know. But I do think that it's about, and we see this with these like live action Baby Olivia bills. It's about forcing a certain belief on our young people. Young people are extremely impressionable. We know that, and that's why they want to talk about fetal development, for example, with very young people, because they're trying to trigger this emotional response. And they're trying to really indoctrinate. So when we look at the opposition's arguments against sex education, when they say they're indoctrinating children, they're forcing children to have sex, we actually need to pay close attention, because those are the things that they're afraid of, but in reality, what they're actually doing. So I hope I answered your question. Okay, great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allison. Any other questions for Allison as we begin to close our call today? All right, folks, just want to share, thanking all of our participants and speakers, from Representative Clark to Allison Macklin, and then also to both Wendy and Ted with Terminus. We're so grateful for the opportunity for everyone to be here and share space and gain such insightful information. So thinking through where are we going, right? We always understand that we're having all these impactful conversations, but where's the action? So this is where you all, as leaders in your communities, as advocates in advancing comprehensive sex education, this is where we need your support with GCAP. So I'm posting a link in the chat about our call to action form. This is going to be a contact and an interest form where we here at GCAP are able to contact you directly when we need your help and support support. So a couple of things for our Take It to the House and our Government Affairs division within GCAP is having you all either wanting to provide a testimony at a Senate meeting or at a House meeting, writing an op-ed. So we were really fortunate towards the end of last year in December that two of GCAP's Youth Advisory Council members wrote op-eds for sex education and why it's so important. So having that lens of an op-ed using youth voice is going to be so impactful, and we're really looking forward to getting those opt-eds from our young people released in the spring. Also joining action alert calls. So I know SECUS has some action alert calls. Here at GCAP with this call to action and interest form, we will have some call to action and alert calls for you all, just to ensure that you all are kept in the know in ways that you can support in advancing sex education. Also, if you are a part of a youth-led organization or you are a part of an organization that works and supports young people, doing a youth-led postcard campaign, writing to legislators, writing to representatives about why sex education is so important to them. Also for you all to meet with elected officials, and then also a day at the Capitol awareness, which I'm excited to dive into today. So again, if you are interested, I'm highly encouraging you to please complete our interest form so that we can continue the momentum of the work that we're doing, from taking it from our virtual calls to really in-person, feet on the ground in efforts to go ahead and improve our policies here in the state of Georgia. One way that we are doing that is on Monday. So GCAP is taking about 14 young people across the state of Georgia to the Capitol. So we'll be working with Terminus alongside Wendy and Ted, and we will be meeting at the Capitol and meeting with some legislators and then just getting a know. So our day at the Capitol for GCAP is going to be on Monday, May the 24th. If you all are interested and if you have time, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat for you all, just in case you all want to know how you can support our efforts at the Capitol next Monday. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and close our call in time today with just any additional questions, comments, or feedback. I just posted my email address in the chat as well. I hope this was really insightful for you. I'm going to attempt to come back on camera, hoping that technology is going to be in my favor as I close out this call so you all can see me. All right. Well, thank you all for your time this morning. Thank you for your energy and your enthusiasm. And if you need anything from GCAP, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Again, my email's in the chat. And I hope that you all have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday and a wonderful week. Thanks so much for joining our Take It to the House. Have a great day, everyone.